The city of San Antonio is the 7th largest city in the United States. Rich cultural heritage, national historical landmarks, and warm subtropical weather make San Antonio a very popular tourist destination. When most people think of the city, they picture the Alamo, a historical landmark of Texas's struggle for independence. The Riverwalk, San Antonio's most popular tourist attraction, a network of walkways along the San Antonio River. Military City, San Antonio is home to several active military installations. And the San Antonio Spurs, 5-time NBA world champions. With a population of approximately 1.5 million and 7% of that being African Americans, what do we know about the history of blacks in San Antonio? Where do we begin?
So when you look at, in total, all of African American history, most of it has been erased or half told.
And I had one teacher, Miss Hawkins. She taught you that every class is an English class. That was her motto. Every class was an English class. And they taught you, listen, you got to compete. And you're competing against everybody.
Uber is not new. And let me explain something to you. There was a restaurant here by the name of Lifesaver Grill, but they had a famous fried steak. They call it the sizzling steak. And on inclement weather and bad days, people would call in and order that fried steak, and then they would call Bellinger Cab Company to pick that steak up and deliver it to the house, you see? So that concept of doing that Uber's doing is something that black folk were doing 50-something years ago, you see?
While we were there, some guys surrounded the car with baseball bats and sticks. And they were calling us the N-word, and they wanted to do harm to us. But a lady stepped in. She said, you guys stop. All they want was hamburgers. Leave them alone. So she saved our lives.
You know, now when I was, my sister and her boyfriend were dating, and they later married, and I must have been 4 or 5 years old, and we had to go into the back to the front door at the Majestic. We paid for the tickets, and then we went back out the door, back around the corner and up the stairs, because you were not allowed to go into the front door. And another thing, when integration and all of this situation was resolved, and I later got a job and started working, and I took both of my parents to all of the places that we had been denied to go to.
We came under surveillance by the FBI, and they used to go to our parents' house saying that these young brothers are a threat to the internal security of the United States. And my mother told the FBI, these are good kids, they're doing great work, y'all need to leave them alone, they just trying to do better. What we basically worked on back then is organizing black student unions.
When I went to San Francisco, California to go to high school, I got the first new textbook I had ever seen in my life. Because every textbook I had had growing up here in San Antonio, Texas, and going to school in San Antonio Independent School District had come from the white schools. And the textbooks used to have 5 lines in them for signature. You know, you write your name in the book. So, you know, and a new textbook for us was one that only had 7 lines written in it, as such. And some of the textbooks had so many lines down to the bottom, as such, that you couldn't even write your name in them.
You couldn't swim at any of the city swimming pools. They were all segregated. Woodlawn Lake, he lived over on the west side, in the black community on the west side, and they literally had to swim in the creek when they went swimming, because the person in charge, the manager in charge of Woodlawn swimming pool, told them, I can't let y'all swim here, because then we'd have to take all the water out, because our whites wouldn't swim in the same water that blacks were using.
A walk on the river, A Black History of the Alamo City.
Dear Langston, the Negro now speaks of a new river, fed from the mouth of patroness Guadalupe, heavenly in all of her ways. This river is flowing rich and sacredly throughout San Antonio. Patron of lost things, may we be found flourishing beneath its wet ivory and indigo wings, washed in its waters. This river will rinse us, a southern baptismal clean. It branches out, winding and rushing, bubbling from Blue Hole and San Pedro Springs. Here, the black man and black woman sing its praises. You found us growing, cultivating commerce on Commerce Street, baking in the heat off W.W. White, right on up to Martin Luther King. We cross that freedom bridge and live out our lives, thriving to the pulse of this river. This river is a super soulful shakedown, as spiritually stirring as a hymnal sang at St. James AME on Richter Street. It's as sweet as pecan pies made with maple brown hands. The African-American utters of rivers, and it echoes throughout, from the ranch land to the missions, all the way into the urban areas elevated to the Tower of Americas. We are submerged in this drawl and twang, every word we speak, and all the hope that we drink like communion wine. We found our divine purpose deep in the heart of the Lone Star State. We know our blood, sweat, and tears are what make this city great. Every child, woman, and man that reside here in San Antonio are sun-stricken and baked to perfection. Our skin is ridden with powerful rays as we hear the mighty rushing ripples and waves of this water. It will be our refreshment, the bounty that waters our seed. Yes, we will continue speaking of this river, and may its waters never recede.
In the late 1800s, the state of Texas had no orphanage for black children. In 1897, Mrs. Ella Austin founded the Ella Austin Orphanage for Black Children in San Antonio. With the help of the Progressive Women's Club, in 1968, the Ella Austin Orphanage became a multi-purpose center providing community services to East Side residents.
Because there were black kids that lost their parents or became separated for whatever reason or another, and they lived in the orphanage. And it was called Ella Austin Orphanage for Destitute Colored Children. There was a club here in the city called the Progressive Women's Club. They provided what she needed for the school.
In 1891, James Todd Walton, J.T. Walton, a black physician and philanthropist, established his practice in San Antonio. Throughout his life, he provided free medical care for the Ella Austin Orphanage and was a chief financial backer for the Camp Founders Girls Organization. In addition, Dr. Walton purchased property and built the only public playground for black children at the time. The park was known as the Walton Park, then the Colored Park, and finally the Fairchild Park.
The Camp Founder Girls. It was a camp for young girls. A lot of people may not have heard about that, but back during those days of segregation, young black girls couldn't join Camp Fire Girls.
Due to discriminatory practices in the 20s, young black girls were unable to join Camp Fire Girls, nor were charters being granted. Therefore, in 1924, Mrs. Mattie Landry founded and organized Camp Founder Girls in San Antonio at St. Paul Methodist Church.
I remember the many days that we had fundraisers with Maddie Landry, who always worked hard.
The camp founders girls, for providing a place for young girls and women to learn the kinds of life skills and teamwork skills.
We were able to stay in cabin-type dwellings, but they did have campfire experiences.
But she had land in Bernie, and every summer you could go to camp in Bernie.
We would elect a Queen of Soul every year. We were very proud to see our queen riding down Broadway on a float, waving to, just like the other queens. Miss Dignity was another way, a junior beauty queen, you might say, and she would ride down the float. So we were very proud.
Due to medical exclusion or being underserved, blacks created and operated a number of medical centers on the east side in San Antonio, such as the Whittier Clinic, the Good Samaritan Hospital, the Ruth Bellinger Medical Clinic, Hicks Maternity Hospital, and the Ella Austin Health Center. In the 1920s, Dr. Charles Austin Whittier established the Whittier Clinic. He had 2 overnight rooms where he performed minor surgery and kept patients overnight. In addition, Dr. Whittier offered a training facility for black interns in his clinic.
Dr. C.A. Whittier and Dr. Onsi Whittier, they were brothers and they were both doctors. Dr. Eugene Fuller, who was down on Cherry Street. We had the Good Samaritan Hospital on Connolly Street. Now that was a black hospital. Now, as a matter of fact, it's the only black hospital I can remember coming up was the Good Samaritan Hospital.
When hospitals were racially segregated, the Good Samaritan Hospital served as the hospital for blacks in San Antonio. The structure was built around 1915 and converted into a hospital for black patients in the 1940s. It opened as a 70-bed facility with laboratories, x-ray, fluoroscopy, and 2 operating rooms. Dr. Frank Bryant was the co-founder and first medical director of Ella Austin Health Center in 1978. He recognized that East San Antonio was medically underserved, so he used his talent to correct this deficiency. Dr. Robert Lee Moore Hilliard was born and raised in San Antonio and graduated as salutatorian of Phyllis Wheatley High School class of 1947. From the beginning to the end of his medical practice, he delivered over 14,000 babies in San Antonio.
He started practice here, and he integrated many hospitals. He was the first black resident in OB-GYN in the South. He was the first chief resident in the South, not just Texas, but throughout the South. He was the first surgeon to do surgery on a Caucasian in the city. And he was the first surgeon to do surgery in a hospital here in town. He came after other doctors like C.A. Whittier, who opened doors also, but he was one who just fought tirelessly for us.
Mrs. Hattie Elam Briscoe. With pride and determination, she made history in the legal profession. In 1956, she graduated first in her class at St. Mary's School of Law. After no law firms in San Antonio would hire her, she established her own practice. She was the first black woman to practice law in Bexar County, Texas, and was the only one for 27 years, from 1956 to 1983. Mrs. Myra Davis Hemmings.
Myra Hemmings taught English at Phyllis Wheatley High School here in San Antonio, but what she did went on to change the world.
I'm a Delta, so Delta Sigma Theta was really significant here in San Antonio because of Mrs. Hemmings in San Antonio went to Howard University in Washington, D.C. And she joined AKA, Alpha Kappa Alpha, and had been at one time president of that sorority. So she broke from AKAs and joined that feminist movement and was one of the founders of Delta Sigma Theta sorority at Howard University in Washington, D.C.
In 1944, Mrs. Hemings co-produced, co-directed, and starred in Go Down Death, now a black film classic produced in San Antonio.
You will take that picture out of that camera now and burn it up. Come on, man, let's get out of here.
And so she contributed to an African American film presence that we had in the 1940s.
For nearly 100 years, the Carver Community Cultural Center, the Carver, has served as the East Side's foremost gathering place of cultural exchange and performance arts. It was originally erected in 1918 as a community center for African Americans. By the 1930s, the building was repurposed as a colored library and renamed the Carver Library and Auditorium in honor of Dr. George Washington Carver.
Ground was broken for the colored branch of San Antonio Public Library, and that's that Carver Community Cultural Center that you see on Hackberry Street.
And we had our dances, like Cab Calloway come in, Count Basie, Jimmy Lumper. You had to have the dances there.
There was Prudence Curry, who was a pastor's wife and a very accomplished woman in her own right. She was installed as the first manager of that branch, and she served there until 1958.
Another guy named Grumbles, he was the first president of the NAACP and a very wealthy African American. He's the one who actually owned the land that the Carver Cultural Center is now on. Later on, when Bellinger becomes the black political boss, he gets the money from the city to establish the Carver Library.
In San Antonio, blacks have made significant contributions to military history. The Buffalo Soldiers, a segregated Army unit made up mostly of black soldiers from 1866 until the early 1890s. They were known as peacekeepers of the West and respected for their fighting ability.
See, you read about the Buffalo Soldier, but in the history book it'll say the 9th Cavalry, the 10th Cavalry. They just forget to tell you that all the soldiers in the 9th and 10th Cavalry was black. At first they was called the Colored Army. 1866, they was organized as the Colored Army. But when they came west, the Indians had never seen nothing but white soldiers. And they saw how the colored soldier fought. They was dark like the buffalo, they had woolly hair like the buffalo, and the fierceness of the buffalo. And the colored soldiers didn't like to be called colored no way, and they considered that an honor. So in 1872, I always say early 1870s because some people say 72, some say 73. So they was allowed to use the Buffalo Soldier patch and was given the name the Buffalo Soldier. And they did whatever was required of them. They had the less desertion of any unit in the military, less desertion.
The Tuskegee Airmen became one of the most highly respected fighter groups of World War II. Today there's a museum at Randolph Air Force Base that features the history of the Tuskegee Airmen and a San Antonio chapter. In spite of the honorable service of blacks in the military during the Jim Crow segregation era, black soldiers were prosecuted in the largest military trial in U.S. history at Fort Sam Houston.
Reverend Kelly was the pastor of Second Baptist Church. He also read the last prayer of the soldiers that were executed at Fort Sam Houston.
Those black GIs who had a mutiny there in Houston and was marched down here to Salado Creek here and hang on the Salado Creek here in San Antonio.
A racial riot in Houston led to black soldiers from the 24th Infantry Regiment being sent to San Antonio. For their role in the riot, the men were tried, found guilty of mutiny, and sentenced to death. 13 black soldiers were hanged in San Antonio in 1917. Joe Williams played for the San Antonio Black Broncos, a Negro League baseball team based in San Antonio, Texas in 1908 and 1909. He was a right-handed pitcher, and his nickname was Cyclone Joe or Smokey Joe. he is widely recognized as one of the game's greatest pitchers, even though he never played a game in the major leagues. He was elected to the Baseball Hall of Fame in 1999. John Miles was a Tuskegee Airman and a professional baseball player for the Chicago American Giants in the Negro Leagues from 1946 to 1948. He was known as John Mule Miles because it was said that he hit the baseball as hard as a mule kicks. As part of Negro League history, John Miles is famous for hitting 11 home runs in 11 straight games. Willie Mitchell was a professional football player and Super Bowl champion with the Kansas City Chiefs in 1969. He grew up in East San Antonio and was a 1959 graduate of Wheatley High School. Warren McVeigh was one of the greatest running backs in state history. As a junior at Brackenridge, he helped lead them to the state championship. He made history in 1965 when he became the first black to play for a major college football team in Texas, the University of Houston. Clyde Glosson was a 1965 graduate of Wheatley High School and a state champion and national record holder in the 100-meter dash. He went on to become a two-time NCAA track and field sprint champion at Trinity University and the University of Texas at El Paso. He was an alternate track member on the 1968 Olympic team.
For San Antonio to recognize me as one of their outstanding athletes, I appreciate it. I really do.
Keyhole Club was an entertainment venue that operated in the 1940s through the 1960s on both the east side and west side of San Antonio. Owned by Don Albert Dominique, the Keyhole nightclub entertained blacks, whites, Hispanics, and anyone looking for a good time. As an integrated entertainment venue, the Keyhole was ahead of its time in breaking down racial segregation barriers, due largely in part to Don Albert's inclusive attitude. The famed Eastwood Country Club, owned by Johnny Phillips, provided a showcase for black entertainers.
I think in 1954, Johnny Phillips opened his Eastwood Country Club out in East Bexar County.
And so if you were one of those smaller groups on the Chitlin circuit and you were coming to this neck of the woods, you played Eastwood Country Club. Red Fox, the comedian, this was a regular stop for him. And when he wasn't on stage, he tended bar. The most famous of the entertainers at Eastwood Country Club, and was a fixture there, was a lady dancer, and she was a lady, named Miss Wiggles. Back in the day, it would be called shake dancing, and she would do a headstand on that chair, and she would do her shake dance while doing a headstand. And while she did it, she was so athletic that she could move that chair in a 360-degree circle while doing her shake dance while standing on her head on that chair. So Eastwood Country Club gave you the Chitlin circuit, trios, quartets, singers, instrumentalists, and Miss Wiggles.
This award-winning documentary film is available in its entirety at our website, walkontheriver.com. Purchase your DVD or digital download today. Also join us for the Freedom Black History Bus Tours, visiting 18 historic African American landmarks and locations in San Antonio, Texas. Visit walkontheriver.com for more information.